What people almost never talk about when it comes to survival is how quickly a bad handgun choice can put you in the ground. When systems fail and order disappears, your pistol stops being a hobby item and becomes a tool you depend on to stay alive. The problem is that most people choose based on popularity, marketing, or what looks good on a range day, not on what actually survives long-term abuse, neglect, and chaos. I spent months digging through military adoption records, long-term endurance testing, and real-world failure reports from extreme environments. And what I found flipped a lot of common assumptions upside down. Some of the most hyped handguns on the market start breaking parts, losing springs, or choking on debris far sooner than anyone wants to admit. Others just keep going, even when everything around them is falling apart. This list is not about trends or favorites. It is about pistols that make sense when there is no armorer's bench, no spare parts store, and no second chances. We are starting at number 10 and working our way toward the handgun that gives you the best odds of staying alive when nothing else is guaranteed. FN 509 starts this list at number 10, and while it did not ultimately replace the Beretta M9 in U.S. military service, that outcome misses the bigger picture of what this pistol was actually designed to do. The FN 509 was built from the ground up around the brutal requirements of the modular handgun system trials, a testing environment that prioritizes endurance over comfort and exposes firearms to sustained sand infiltration, fine dust, thick mud, salt fog, extreme heat, sub-zero cold, and round counts high enough to reveal long-term structural weaknesses. In its standard duty configuration, the FN 509 feeds 17 plus 1 rounds of 9mm from steel magazines through a 4-inch cold hammer forged barrel, with an overall length just over 7 inches, a height around 5.5 inches, and an unloaded weight in the mid-20-ounce range, depending on slide and frame variant. Those measurements place it squarely in the full-size duty pistol category. But the real story is how the gun behaves when conditions are bad and shooters are not operating at their best. The slide features deep, sharply defined serrations at both the front and rear that are cut with function in mind rather than aesthetics, allowing the pistol to be manipulated reliably with wet hands, gloves, numb fingers, or reduced grip strength from injury or fatigue. The grip frame uses a coarse, duty-oriented texture combined with interchangeable backstraps that let the shooter tailor hand fit without compromising control, and that texture stays planted even when rain, sweat, or debris enter the equation. Internally, the FN 509 uses robust steel rails embedded into the polymer frame, a fully supported chamber, and a striker system designed for high round count durability rather than light competition tuning. The trigger typically breaks in the 5 to 5.5 pound range with a clean wall and a short, positive reset, which is not match grade, but is predictable and consistent under stress. Exactly what matters when adrenaline is high and fine motor skills are gone. Recoil impulse is flat and controllable thanks to the pistol's balance and bore axis, allowing faster follow-up shots without excessive muzzle rise. FN's background as a longtime military and law enforcement supplier shows in the overall build quality, from slide metallurgy to spring rates chosen for longevity instead of feel. From a survival standpoint, the FN 509's biggest weakness is not reliability, but logistics, since its magazines and small parts are not as common in circulation as those for Glock or Sig platforms, which can matter if long-term resupply becomes necessary. However, for shooters who plan ahead and secure magazines and spare recoil springs early, the FN 509 offers exceptional durability, resistance to environmental abuse, and consistent performance across a wide temperature range. Current street prices typically fall in the mid-$500 to low $600 range, depending on configuration, placing it firmly in the realistic duty gun category rather than the boutique market. It may not be the most popular pistol on social media, but when conditions start destroying lesser designs, the FN 509 keeps cycling, keeps feeding, and keeps firing, which is exactly why it earns its place at number 10 on a list built around survival instead of hype. CZP-10C takes the number 9 spot, and it represents decades of Czech firearms experience distilled into a modern striker-fired pistol that prioritizes control, durability, and real-world performance over trend chasing. When CZ entered the polymer duty pistol market, the goal was not to clone existing designs, but to refine them, and that intent shows up immediately once the gun is in your hands. The P10C feeds 15+1 rounds of 9mm through a 4-inch barrel, with an overall length just over 7 inches, a height around 5.2 inches, a grip width slightly over 1 inch, and an unloaded weight that sits close to 26 ounces, placing it firmly in the compact duty category that balances carry practicality with shootability. The slide is machined from forged steel and treated with a durable nitride finish that resists corrosion and wear, while the barrel uses traditional CZ cold hammer forging for longevity and consistent accuracy over high round counts. What truly separates the P10C from many striker-fire pistols is the trigger, which offers a distinct wall, a clean break in the mid-4-pound range, and a short, tactile reset that allows precise follow-up shots without aftermarket work. In a survival environment, that level of trigger control directly translates into fewer wasted rounds and better shot placement when stress is high and ammunition may be limited. The grip geometry is another standout feature, combining an aggressive but practical texture with interchangeable backstraps that allow the pistol to fit a wide range of hand sizes and shooting conditions, whether you're barehanded, wearing gloves, or compensating for fatigue or injury. Internally, the P10C uses robust steel slide rails molded into the polymer frame, a striker system designed for duty reliability rather than competition tuning, and spring rates chosen to keep the gun running across a wide range of ammunition and environmental conditions. CZ proof tests every pistol to standards rooted in long-standing military doctrine, and the result is a handgun that tolerates dirt, debris, and neglect without becoming finicky. Recoil impulse is flat and predictable, aided by the pistol's low-bore axis and balanced slide mass, making rapid strings of fire easier to control than many pistols in its class. From a survival standpoint, the main limitations are not reliability, but ecosystem size. Since the aftermarket is smaller than Glock and parts availability is not quite as universal, although magazines, holsters, and night sights are readily available and widely supported. Current street prices typically fall between $400 and $500 depending on configuration, which places the P10C in a very accessible price range for a duty-grade handgun. It may not dominate social media or police contracts worldwide, but for shooters who value shootability, mechanical confidence, and a pistol that performs exactly the same on round 1 as it does on round 10,000, the CZ P10C is a quiet workhorse that earns its place on any serious survival-focused list. Ruger LCP Max lands at number 8, and this is where a lot of people immediately get uncomfortable, because it is a .380 ACP pocket pistol rather than what most would call a serious fighting handgun, but that reaction is exactly why it deserves to be here. The LCP Max exists for the moments no one likes to plan for, the times when you're not dressed for a bell holster, when you're sleeping, scavenging, moving fast, climbing, injured, exhausted, or simply trying to stay unnoticed, because in a real survival environment, you will not always be walking around geared up like a range day fantasy. The LCP Max weighs just over 10 ounces unloaded and only a few ounces more when loaded, making it lighter than many spare magazines for full-size pistols, with an overall length of roughly 5.1 inches, a height just under 4 inches, a width under 1 inch, and a barrel length of about 2.8 inches, which allows it to disappear into a pocket, waistband, ankle rig, or small bag without affecting how you move or draw attention to yourself. Despite its size, it carries 10+1 rounds of .380 ACP in the flush magazine, with extended magazines available that push capacity to 12+1, which is a significant increase over earlier pocket pistols that barely held 6 or 7 rounds. Ruger redesigned the fire control system compared to the original LCP, giving the Max a noticeably shorter, cleaner trigger pull that is far more controllable under stress, with a defined break that allows deliberate shots instead of the long, vague pull that plagued earlier generations. The sights are another major improvement, as they are real steel sights with usable contrast rather than molded bumps, making quick alignment possible in daylight and acceptable in low light with practice. The recoil impulse is snappy due to the light weight, but the grip texture and redesigned frame geometry make it manageable with proper technique. And at the distances this pistol is intended for, control matters more than comfort. The short barrel does limit velocity and effective range, realistically keeping reliable performance inside 7 to 10 yards. But that aligns with the reality that most defensive encounters in collapse scenarios are sudden, close, and chaotic rather than clean 25-yard engagements. From a survival perspective, the biggest advantage of the LCP Max is not caliber or accuracy, but presence, because a gun you can always keep on you is infinitely more valuable than a larger, more powerful pistol that gets left behind when circumstances change. Ammunition weight also matters, and .380 ACP allows you to carry more round for the same burden, which adds up when every ounce counts. The polymer frame resists sweat and moisture. The simple internal design tolerates neglect reasonably well, and the pistol can be field stripped quickly for basic cleaning without specialized tools. Current street prices generally fall in the $300 to $400 range, making it accessible enough to serve as a dedicated backup or constant carry option rather than a compromise you regret buying. The LCP Max is not designed to win prolonged gunfights, hunt game, or replace a duty pistol, and pretending otherwise misses the point entirely. Its role is to ensure that when everything else goes wrong, when you cannot carry anything larger, and when surprise is working against you, you are still armed with a reliable, modern handgun that gives you a fighting chance. In survival, consistency beats idealism every time, and the Ruger LCP Max earns its place by being the gun that is there when others are not. Ruger GP100 comes in at number 7, and it is the kind of handgun that looks outdated right up until you start thinking beyond short-term fights and into months or years of survival, where durability matters more than convenience. This is a 6-shot .357 Magnum revolver built on a heavy stainless steel frame, most commonly configured with a 4-inch barrel, an overall length of roughly 9.5 inches, a height just over 5 inches, and an unloaded weight hovering around 40 ounces, which immediately tells you this is not a lightweight or minimalist design. That weight is not a liability. It is structural strength, mass where it matters, and insurance against long-term wear. The GP100 was engineered with Ruger's overbuilt philosophy, using a solid frame without a removable side plate, a triple locking cylinder system that locks at the front, rear, and bottom, and thick steel throughout the forcing cone and top strap, all of which contribute to exceptional longevity under sustained firing. Revolvers eliminate magazines entirely, and in a true long-term survival scenario, magazines are one of the weakest links in semi-automatic pistols. As springs lose tension, feed lips bend, followers crack, and compatibility becomes an issue over time. The GP100 sidesteps all of that. There are no magazines to lose, damage, or scavenge, and there is no feeding cycle dependent on ammunition shape or spring tension. If a round fits in the cylinder, it fires. This revolver can be dropped into dirt, mud, or sand, rinsed with water, shaken out, and fired immediately with no concern for cycling reliability. It can be stored in a cache for months or even years, pulled out cold, and still function the moment the trigger is pulled, which is something very few semi-autos can claim without maintenance. Chambered in .357 Magnum, the GP100 delivers serious terminal performance and penetration, making it viable not only for defense, but also for hunting and dispatching animals when needed, and the ability to also fire .38 special dramatically increases ammunition flexibility when supply becomes unpredictable. You can train, practice, and hunt small game with softer recoiling .38 loads, then switch to full power .357 Magnum for defense or larger threats, all from the same platform with no modifications. The stainless steel construction resists rust, corrosion, and environmental damage far better than blued steel, especially in wet, humid, or coastal environments where neglect is unavoidable. The double-action trigger is long but smooth and consistent, designed to function reliably even when dirty, while the single-action option allows precise shots at extended distances when accuracy matters more than speed. Maintenance is minimal, parts wear is slow, and even when tolerances open up over extreme round counts, revolvers tend to keep functioning rather than failing catastrophically. The trade-off is obvious and unavoidable, as capacity is limited to 6 rounds and reloads are slower than swapping magazines. But survival is not always about volume of fire. 6 rounds that fire every single time, regardless of dirt, neglect, or ammunition variation, are often more valuable than a higher capacity system that depends on multiple consumable components remaining perfect. Current street prices for the Ruger GP 100 typically fall in the $700 to $800 range depending on barrel length and configuration, which reflects the amount of steel, machining, and longevity built into the gun. The GP 100 is not fast, not light, and not modern in the polymer sense, but it is brutally honest in what it offers, a handgun that prioritizes certainty over convenience and reliability over fashion. In a long-term collapse where replacement parts are scarce, maintenance is inconsistent, and failure carries serious consequences, the Ruger GP 100 stands out as a revolver you can trust to keep working long after many semi-autos start turning into paperweights. 1911 platform takes the number 6 position, and it earns that spot not because of nostalgia or tradition, but because it has survived more than a century of real warfare, hard use, and constant evolution without losing relevance when conditions get ugly. A typical full-size 1911 is built around a 5-inch barrel, an overall length of roughly 8.5 inches, a height close to 5.5 inches, and an unloaded weight just under 40 ounces, depending on manufacturer and frame material, which places it firmly in the heavy, duty-grade category rather than anything compact or lightweight. Capacity is usually 7 or 8 plus 1 rounds of .45 ACP. And while that number looks small next to modern double-stack pistols, it forces the shooter to focus on fundamentals rather than volume, which matters when ammunition is limited and resupply is uncertain. What keeps the 1911 viable in a survival context is not capacity, but mechanical clarity and shootability. The single-action trigger is one of the cleanest and most consistent trigger systems ever put into a fighting handgun, typically breaking between 4 and 5 pounds with minimal take-up and a short, positive reset, which makes accurate shot placement easier under stress and fatigue. When every round matters, the ability to make deliberate hits at distance without fighting a spongy or inconsistent trigger becomes a serious advantage rather than a luxury. The .45 ACP cartridge operates at subsonic velocities, producing a deeper, slower recoil impulse and reduced muzzle blast compared to faster calibers, which aids control and sound discipline, especially in enclosed spaces or low-light environments where blast and concussion can be disorienting. The all-steel construction of a traditional 1911 contributes to durability, recoil management, and long service life, and unlike many modern designs, the internal system is straightforward, using a hammer, sear, disconnector, and springs that can be serviced, tuned, or replaced with basic hand tools rather than specialized fixtures. This matters in a long-term survival scenario where access to factory support or drop-in replacement parts may be limited. The design has been studied, copied, and supported for generations, meaning institutional knowledge is everywhere, and even improvised repairs are more realistic than with newer, more complex striker systems. The grip angle and slim single-stack frame make the gun comfortable for a wide range of hand sizes, and the manual thumb safety, when properly trained, allows the pistol to be carried safely while remaining immediately ready. The drawbacks are real and should not be ignored. The 1911 demands maintenance, lubrication, and quality magazines to remain reliable over time, and neglect will eventually catch up to it faster than with some modern polymer pistols. Capacity is limited, reloads are slower, and weight can become a burden during long movements. However, when properly set up with proven magazines and springs, the 1911 is not fragile, unreliable, or outdated. It is simply honest about what it requires from a shooter. Current prices vary widely, with entry-level duty-grade models often starting in the $500 to $600 range and climbing significantly for higher-end examples. But even budget-focused manufacturers can produce serviceable pistols when built to proper specifications. The 1911 does not try to be everything, and it does not forgive poor training, but it rewards discipline, accuracy, and maintenance with consistent performance and fight-stopping effectiveness. In a survival environment where precision, mechanical transparency, and long-term serviceability matter more than trends or capacity bragging rights, the 1911 remains a serious defensive tool that has already proven its worth across more than 100 years of conflict, chaos, and hard reality. Beretta 92 takes the number 5 position, and its place on this list is earned through decades of hard military service that no marketing campaign could ever replicate. For more than 30 years, this pistol served as the standard sidearm of the United States military, which means it was issued to hundreds of thousands of service members, fired through millions of rounds in training, carried in deserts, jungles, vehicles, armories, and war zones, and exposed to neglect, dirt, sweat, and abuse on a scale few handguns will ever experience. The Beretta 92 in its classic full-size configuration feeds 15 plus 1 rounds of 9mm through a nearly 5-inch barrel, typically measuring around 4.9 inches, with an overall length just under 8.5 inches, a height around 5.5 inches, and an unloaded weight slightly above 33 ounces thanks to its aluminum frame and steel slide. Those dimensions make it a large handgun by modern standards, but that size contributes directly to its controllability, durability, and long service life. One of the defining features of the Beretta 92 is its open slide design, which leaves much of the barrel exposed and allows debris like sand, dust, and unburnt powder to fall free rather than becoming trapped inside the action, a characteristic that has proven valuable in dirty environments where closed slide pistols can begin to choke. The locking block system, rather than a tilting barrel, allows the barrel to remain more linear during cycling, which contributes to smooth recoil impulse and excellent mechanical accuracy, especially during slow, deliberate fire. The all-metal construction plays a major role in why these pistols routinely surpass extremely high round counts, with documented examples exceeding 100,000 rounds when properly maintained, far beyond what most shooters will ever achieve. The weight and balance soak up recoil effectively, making the pistol easier to shoot well for extended sessions and under stress, particularly for shooters who struggle with lighter polymer frames snapping aggressively during recoil. The double-action and single-action trigger system requires training, as the first trigger pull is long and heavy, usually around 12 pounds, followed by lighter single-action pulls in the 5-pound range. But once mastered, it offers a consistent and predictable manual of arms that many shooters find reassuring in high-stress situations. The slide-mounted safety and decocker allow the pistol to be carried safely with a round chambered while still providing immediate readiness. And while some dislike its placement, it has proven functional across decades of service. From a survival perspective, one of the Beretta 92's greatest strengths is logistical support. Because of its long military history, magazines are widely available, including surplus options, and aftermarket manufacturers produce reliable replacements in both standard and extended capacities. Spare parts, springs, and institutional knowledge are abundant, which matters when long-term upkeep becomes your responsibility rather than an armorer's. The pistol's accuracy is often underestimated, as the long sight radius and stable barrel system allow consistent 3-inch groups at 25 yards with quality ammunition, making precise shot placement realistic when needed. The drawbacks are real and should be acknowledged. The Beretta 92 is large, wide through the grip, and not well suited for discreet carry, and the slide-mounted safety is not universally loved. However, in a collapse scenario, concealment often takes a back seat to reliability, shootability, and durability. Current street prices for standard Beretta 92 variants typically fall in the $600 to $700 range, depending on model and condition, with surplus and police trade-ins sometimes available for less, making it accessible for a pistol with this level of proven service history. The Beretta 92 is not trendy, not compact, and not optimized for modern concealed carry culture, but it is a proven duty handgun that has survived decades of institutional abuse without falling apart. In a survival context where longevity, mechanical resilience, and realistic long-term support matter more than fashion or minimalism, The Beretta 92 stands as a reminder that some designs earned their reputation the hard way, and that kind of track record still matters when failure is not an option. Smith & Wesson M&P9 earns the number 4 position because it was shaped from the beginning by direct input from law enforcement officers who carry their pistols every day and depend on them in unpredictable, high-stress situations, and that real-world feedback is baked into the design rather than added later as an afterthought. In its full-size configuration, the M&P9 carries 17 plus 1 rounds of 9mm through a 4.25-inch barrel, with an overall length just over 7.5 inches, a height around 5.5 inches, a grip width slightly over 1 inch, and an unloaded weight that sits right around 24 ounces, making it lighter than most all-metal duty pistols while still maintaining enough mass to control recoil effectively. The slide is machined from stainless steel and treated with a durable corrosion-resistant finish that holds up well against sweat, humidity, and environmental exposure, while the barrel uses a conventional rifling profile that balances accuracy with long-term durability across a wide range of ammunition types. One of the strongest characteristics of the M&P9 is how naturally it points, as the grip angle and frame contour were designed to mimic the feel of traditional service pistols rather than forcing the shooter to adapt to the gun, which reduces training time and improves instinctive shooting under stress. The grip texture is aggressive enough to maintain control in rain, heat, or with sweaty hands, but not so abrasive that it shreds skin during long practice sessions, and the interchangeable backstraps allow the grip circumference to be tuned for different hand sizes, gloves, or injury-related grip changes. Ambidextrous controls are standard, including slide-stop levers on both sides and a reversible magazine release, which becomes a serious advantage if the shooter is forced to operate the gun with their non-dominant hand due to injury or environmental constraints. Early generations of the platform were criticized for vague or mushy triggers, but later iterations, especially the updated duty-focused versions, corrected this with a cleaner break typically in the 5 to 6 pound range and a more tactile reset that supports controlled defensive shooting without requiring immediate aftermarket work. Internally, the M&P9 uses steel chassis rails molded into the polymer frame to provide consistent slide travel and long-term structural integrity, along with spring rates selected for reliability across temperature extremes and varied ammunition pressures rather than competition tuning. Recoil impulse is predictable and straight back, helping shooters maintain sight alignment during rapid strings of fire, and practical accuracy is solid, with a pistol capable of consistent groups at defensive distances without demanding perfect technique. From a survival standpoint, one of the M&P9's greatest strengths is ecosystem support, as widespread law enforcement adoption means magazines, recoil springs, sights, holsters, and small parts are abundant and familiar to anyone who has spent time around duty pistols. Institutional knowledge is everywhere, which matters when formal training resources disappear and maintenance becomes a personal responsibility. The pistol is also tolerant of neglect, continuing to function reliably with minimal lubrication and imperfect cleaning, which is realistic in long-term stress environments. Current street prices generally fall in the $400 to $500 range, depending on configuration and market conditions, making it accessible without sacrificing duty-grade reliability. The M&P9 is not flashy, not exotic, and not built to win internet arguments, but it excels at the things that actually matter when conditions deteriorate: controllability, adaptability, reliability, and long-term support. In a survival context where stress is high, fine motor skills degrade, and equipment has to work with the shooter rather than against them, the Smith & Wesson M&P9 stands out as a pistol designed around human realities instead of marketing claims, which is exactly why it earns its place near the top of this list. Sig Sauer P320 takes the number 3 spot, and it earns that position because it was built around adaptability as a core concept rather than an afterthought, which matters enormously when long-term survival forces you to do more with less. The P320 was adopted by the U.S. military in multiple configurations, including full-size and compact variants, and that adoption was driven by its ability to survive extreme environmental testing, high round counts, and repeated abuse without losing functional consistency. In its full-size form, the P320 carries 17 plus 1 rounds of 9mm through a barrel that measures roughly 4.7 inches, with an overall length just over 8 inches, a height around 5.5 inches, and an unloaded weight in the mid-25-ounce range, depending on configuration. On the surface, those numbers place it firmly in the duty pistol category. But the defining feature of the P320 is not its size or capacity. It is the serialized fire control unit at the heart of the design. That internal chassis is legally the firearm, and it can be removed and installed into different grip modules, slides, and barrel lengths without specialized tools, allowing a single core component to serve multiple roles as conditions change. In a survival environment where resources are limited and replacement firearms may not be an option, that modularity becomes a logistical advantage rather than a novelty. One P320 can transition from a full-size duty setup to a more compact configuration simply by swapping components, reducing the need to maintain entirely separate pistols for different tasks. The grip modules are available in multiple sizes and textures, allowing the shooter to adjust grip circumference and ergonomics for gloves, cold weather, or hand injuries without altering the operating system of the gun. Internally, the P320 uses robust steel rails integrated into the fire control unit rather than molded directly into the polymer frame, which contributes to consistent slide movement and long-term durability under sustained use. The striker-fired trigger is consistent and predictable, typically breaking in the 5 to 6 pound range with a smooth press and a positive reset that supports controlled, repeatable shooting under stress rather than competition-focused lightness. Recoil impulse is straight back and manageable, aided by the pistol's balance and bore geometry, allowing faster follow-up shots without excessive muzzle rise. The P320 endured extensive military testing that included exposure to sand, dust, mud, water, extreme heat, extreme cold, and prolonged firing schedules. And while early production pistols raised concerns related to drop safety, those issues were addressed through an updated safety configuration that corrected the problem. Ensuring that any P320 in a survival loadout includes this updated configuration is critical. But once that box is checked, the platform has proven itself reliable across a wide range of conditions. Magazine availability is another strength, as military adoption and widespread law enforcement use have resulted in strong aftermarket support, abundant spare magazines, and readily available replacement springs and small parts. Extended magazines are also common, allowing higher capacity without sacrificing reliability. Maintenance requirements are straightforward. Field stripping is simple, and the pistol tolerates reasonable levels of neglect without immediately degrading performance, which is realistic when cleaning supplies and time are limited. Accuracy is solid and consistent, with the P320 capable of delivering reliable defensive groups at distance without demanding perfect technique, making it forgiving when fatigue and stress take their toll. Current street prices for standard P320 models generally fall in the $500 to $600 range, depending on configuration, which places it within reach of most shooters looking for a duty-grade pistol rather than a boutique option. The Sig Sauer P320 is not the lightest, smallest, or simplest handgun on this list, but it offers something few others can: the ability to adapt as circumstances change without replacing the core of the firearm. In a survival scenario where flexibility, durability, and long-term logistics matter as much as raw reliability, the P320 stands out as a pistol that can evolve with the shooter rather than locking them into a single role, which is exactly why it earns the number 3 position. Glock 17 takes the number 2 position as the modern benchmark for durability, simplicity, and long-term survivability, and its reputation is not built on hype or clever marketing, but on decades of real-world abuse across military, law enforcement, and civilian use worldwide. In its standard full-size configuration, the Glock 17 carries 17 plus 1 rounds of 9mm through a 4.49-inch barrel, with an overall length of roughly 8 inches, a height just over 5.5 inches, a grip width around 1.2 inches, and an unloaded weight in the mid-22-ounce range, making it lighter than most all-metal duty pistols while still large enough to shoot well under stress. Those dimensions strike a balance between controllability and practicality. But what truly defines the Glock 17 is how little it asks of the user to keep working. The polymer frame is impervious to rust, resistant to moisture, and unaffected by sweat, rain, or prolonged exposure to harsh environments that would degrade wood or corrode untreated steel, while the steel slide and barrel receive protective finishes designed to survive years of neglect. Internally, the Glock design is intentionally minimal, using a small number of robust parts with generous tolerances that allow the pistol to keep cycling even when dirty, dry, or fouled with debris. There are no external safeties to snag or forget under stress, no decockers or complex trigger transitions to manage. Just a consistent trigger pull from the first shot to the last that allows the shooter to focus on fundamentals rather than mechanics. The trigger itself is not refined or match grade, typically breaking in the 5 to 6 pound range, but it is consistent, predictable, and forgiving when fine motor skills deteriorate under adrenaline, which is exactly when survival decisions matter most. One of the Glock 17's greatest advantages in a collapse scenario is logistics, because magazine compatibility extends across much of the Glock 9mm family, meaning magazines from compact or subcompact models can feed the full-size pistol without issue, instantly expanding your usable supply if you scavenge or consolidate gear. That interoperability is priceless when standardized equipment disappears and every compatible component becomes valuable. Global adoption ensures that magazines, recoil springs, small parts, and institutional knowledge are everywhere, making the Glock 17 one of the easiest pistols in the world to keep running long-term without factory support. The barrel uses a proven rifling system that balances accuracy and longevity, and while it may not be optimized for boutique ammunition, it performs reliably across a wide range of loads, which matters when ammunition quality becomes inconsistent. Recoil impulse is straightforward and manageable, aided by the pistol's size and grip geometry, allowing rapid follow-up shots without excessive muzzle rise. And practical accuracy is more than sufficient for defensive use, with consistent groups achievable at distance by shooters of varying skill levels. The Glock 17 is famously tolerant of neglect, often continuing to function with minimal lubrication and imperfect cleaning, which aligns with the realities of long-term stress environments where maintenance time and supplies are limited. Critics often point to its utilitarian appearance, blocky grip, and lack of refinement, but those complaints miss the point entirely. In a survival context, aesthetics, ergonomics debates, and internet opinions do not matter. What matters is whether the gun fires every time the trigger is pressed, whether replacement parts can be found, and whether the system keeps working as conditions deteriorate. Current street prices generally fall in the $500 range, sometimes less depending on market conditions and availability, making it accessible for a duty-grade handgun with this level of proven reliability. The Glock 17 is not elegant, not exciting, and not designed to impress anyone at the range, but it has earned a reputation for working when everything else fails. In a world where complexity becomes a liability and logistics decide survival, the Glock 17 stands out as a pistol that does exactly what it was designed to do with no drama, no excuses, and no surprises, which is why it sits just one step away from the top of this list. Glock 19 takes the #1 position because it represents the most balanced, realistic, and survivable handgun choice when everything else is stripped away and the only thing that matters is whether the gun works every single time you need it, regardless of environment, maintenance, or circumstance. And that reputation has been earned through decades of real use rather than marketing hype. Designed to sit perfectly between full-size duty pistols and compact carry guns, the Glock 19 avoids the compromises that plague both extremes, which is exactly why it has become one of the most trusted handguns in the world among military units, law enforcement agencies, and civilians who depend on their equipment as tools rather than accessories. In its standard configuration, the Glock 19 carries 15 plus 1 rounds of 9mm through a barrel measuring just over 4 inches. With an overall length of roughly 7¼ inches, a height around 5 inches, a grip width close to 1.2 inches, and an unloaded weight of approximately 23 ounces. A combination that allows it to remain comfortable for all-day carry while still providing enough mass and grip surface to control recoil during fast, repeated fire. Those dimensions are not accidental, because they allow the pistol to conceal far more easily than a full-size handgun while retaining the sight radius, balance, and shootability of a true fighting pistol rather than a compromised compact. The polymer frame is immune to rust and highly resistant to sweat, moisture, dirt, and extreme temperature swings, while the steel slide and barrel are treated with durable protective finishes designed to survive abrasion, neglect, and harsh environmental exposure that would quickly degrade more traditional materials. Internally, the Glock 19 follows a deliberately minimalist design philosophy, relying on a low parts count, generous tolerances, and a striker-fired system that prioritizes consistent ignition and reliable cycling over refinement or mechanical complexity. And that simplicity is exactly what allows it to keep running when fouling, debris, or imperfect ammunition would stop tighter designs. The trigger is utilitarian by design, typically breaking in the 5 to 6 pound range with a consistent pull and a short, tactile reset that feels the same from the first shot to the last, which becomes a major advantage under stress when fine motor skills deteriorate and predictability keeps you functional. One of the Glock 19's most important survival advantages is magazine compatibility, because it can accept not only its standard 15-round magazines, but also higher capacity magazines from larger Glock models, instantly expanding available ammunition supply if you consolidate gear, scavenge equipment, or share magazines with others running the same platform. A logistical benefit that becomes critical when standardized supply chains disappear. Recoil impulse is predictable and easy to manage thanks to the balance between slide mass and grip length, allowing fast follow-up shots without excessive muzzle rise. And practical accuracy is excellent, with a pistol capable of delivering consistent defensive hits at realistic distances without demanding perfect technique or expensive modifications. The Glock 19 has endured extreme torture testing that freezes it solid, buries it in sand, submerges it in water, drops it from height, and runs it dry for thousands of rounds, yet continues to function in conditions that sideline or destroy more complex handguns. Maintenance is straightforward. Field stripping requires no tools, and the design tolerates extended periods of minimal lubrication and imperfect cleaning, aligning with the realities of long-term survival where time, supplies, and ideal conditions are limited. Aftermarket support is unmatched, with a massive global supply of magazines, holsters, sights, and replacement parts that makes keeping the pistol running realistic even years into extended use. And street prices generally sit around the $500 range depending on market conditions. The Glock 19 is not the most powerful handgun, not the highest capacity, and not the most refined, but avoids serious weaknesses, carrying enough ammunition to fight, remaining compact enough to carry consistently, simple enough to maintain indefinitely, and common enough to support through shared logistics. Which is exactly why it earns the #1 spot as the handgun that gives you the best odds when failure is not an option. Here is the final lineup, 10 handguns selected with cold logic instead of hype, marketing noise, or brand loyalty. Every pistol on this list earned its place because it solves real problems when conditions turn bad and support disappears. Now, the conversation shifts to you. When reliability matters more than comfort, when maintenance is limited, and when failure is not an option, which handgun do you trust with your life? Is there a model you believe deserves a spot here based on your own experience, training, or long-term use? Drop your choice and explain why. Because survival is never about trends or opinions. It is about preparation, understanding your tools, and making decisions before circumstances force them on you.